The year is 476 AD. The eternal city of Rome is burning. For 1,000 years, Rome was the light of the world. It brought law, order, aqueducts, and roads. It was civilization itself. But now, the barbarians are at the gates. The last emperor, a child named Romulus Augustulus, surrenders his crown to a German warlord. And just like that, the light goes out. Welcome to the Dark Ages. History tells us this was a time of silence, but if you listen closely, it wasn't silent at all. It was the sound of a new world struggling to be born. As the political power of Rome crumbled, a new kind of power was rising to take its place, a power not of swords, but of the soul. In this episode, we journey through the most chaotic 1,400 years in human history. We will watch as Europe falls into mud and superstition, while the East rises in a golden age of science and mathematics. We will see two superpowers, Christianity and Islam, collide in a holy war that soaked the sands of Jerusalem in blood. And just when humans thought they had figured out the rules of God and war, a storm would arrive from the east, a force of nature on horseback that bowed to no book and no king. From the crucifixion in Judea to the mountains of Mongolia, this is the story of how faith saved the world and how it almost destroyed it.
To understand the Middle Ages, we must go back to the height of the Roman Empire. In a dusty province called Judea, a man named Jesus of Nazareth was executed by the Roman state for treason. To the Romans, he was just another rebel, but his death sparked a fire that no legion could extinguish. For 3 centuries, Christians were hunted. They were fed to lions in the Colosseum. They were burned as torches for Emperor Nero's garden parties. But the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. The more Rome killed them, the more they multiplied. Then the impossible happened. In 312 AD, Emperor Constantine was marching into a civil war. He looked up at the sun and saw a vision, a cross of light with the words, "In this sign, conquer." He painted the symbol on his soldiers' shields. He won the battle. And in that moment, the history of the world changed forever. Rome went from killing Christians to becoming Christian. But when the Roman Empire collapsed in 476, the emperors disappeared. Who was left to lead? The bishops. The Pope in Rome became the new Caesar. The Church became the new empire. While kings and warlords fought over scraps of land in the mud, the Church held the keys to eternity. They controlled the only thing that mattered more than life, the afterlife. If a king disobeyed the Pope, he could be excommunicated, sentenced to eternal hellfire. Europe transformed. Great stone cathedrals began to rise above the wooden huts of peasants. Monasteries became the only safe havens for books and knowledge. While the average person could not read or write, monks were busy copying the Bible, preserving the Latin language. But outside the church walls, life was brutal. This was feudalism, a system born of fear. You were a peasant. You worked the land for a lord. The lord protected you from Vikings and bandits. In exchange, you gave him your freedom. It was a dark, static world. But while Europe was sleeping in the dark, the lights were turning on in the east.
In the year 610 AD, in a cave near Mecca, a merchant named Muhammad received a revelation. He was told, "There is no God but God," and he was his final prophet. Like Christianity, Islam began small, but its expansion was explosive. Within 100 years of the Prophet Muhammad's death, the Islamic caliphates controlled an empire larger than Rome ever was, from the sands of Saudi Arabia across North Africa, all the way to Spain in the west and the borders of China in the east. But they didn't just conquer land, they conquered knowledge. While London and Paris were muddy villages, Baghdad was the center of the universe. It was a city of 1 million people, filled with parks, libraries, and hospitals. The caliphs built the House of Wisdom. They paid scholars in gold, literally the weight of a book in gold, to translate the works of Aristotle, Plato, and Greek mathematics into Arabic. While Europeans were using leeches to cure headaches, Islamic doctors were performing eye surgery and understanding blood circulation. They gave us the numbers we use today: 0, 1, 2, 3. They invented algebra, al-Jab. They named the stars Betelgeuse, Rigel, Aldebaran. They figured out the circumference of the Earth while others still feared falling off the edge. It was a civilization of dazzling brilliance, a civilization that valued the ink of a scholar as much as the blood of a martyr. But inevitably, these two expanding giants, Christian Europe and the Islamic East, were destined to crash. And the collision point was a small holy city in the hills, Jerusalem.
The year is 1095. Pope Urban II gives a speech in France. He tells the knights of Europe that the Holy Land is in the hands of infidels. He promises that anyone who goes to fight for Jerusalem will have all their sins forgiven. The crowd erupts with a cry that would haunt history: Deus vult, God wills it. The Crusades had begun. Thousands of men, nobles, peasants, and fanatics sewed red crosses onto their chests and marched 3,000 miles to the east. They were driven by faith, but also by greed. Second-born sons who had no land in Europe saw a chance to carve out kingdoms in the desert. In 1099, the Crusaders reached Jerusalem. The slaughter was horrific. They breached the walls and massacred the population, Muslims, Jews, and even Christians living in the city. History records that the horses waded in blood up to their ankles. They established the Kingdom of Jerusalem. But it couldn't last. The Islamic world, initially divided, found a unifier. His name was Saladin. Saladin was a warrior philosopher. He was respected even by his enemies for his chivalry. In 1187, he lured the Crusader army into the desert at the Horns of Hattin. He cut off their water supply. The European knights, encased in heavy iron armor under the baking sun, collapsed from heat stroke before the battle even began. Saladin took Jerusalem back, but unlike the Crusaders, he did not massacre the civilians. He allowed those who could pay to leave safely. When King Richard the Lionheart of England arrived to fight him, they reached a stalemate. They never met, but they exchanged gifts. When Richard fell ill, Saladin sent him fruit and snow from the mountains. The Crusades continued for 2 centuries, a bloody stalemate that ultimately changed little on the map, but deepened the divide between East and West forever. While Christians and Muslims were fighting over a city of stone, a storm was gathering on the steppes of Mongolia. A boy named Temujin was born clutching a blood clot in his fist, a sign of a great killer. His father was poisoned. His family was cast out to starve. He grew up eating rats to survive. But this boy would not die. He united the warring tribes of the steppe. In 1206, he took the title Genghis Khan, universal ruler. The Mongols were unlike anything the world had ever seen. They lived in the saddle. They could shoot an arrow with deadly accuracy while riding at full gallop. They could cover 100 miles a day. They didn't have an infantry. Their entire army was cavalry. Genghis Khan unleashed a blitzkrieg on the world. He conquered Beijing. He destroyed the Islamic Empire of Khwarezmia. He annihilated the Russian princes. His strategy was terror. If a city surrendered, he spared it. If it resisted, he killed everyone. Every man, woman, child, and even the dogs and cats. He wanted no living thing left to remember his name. He created the largest contiguous land empire in history. He killed so many people, an estimated 40 million, that the carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere actually dropped because forests regrew over populated farmlands. He told his enemies, "I am the punishment of God. If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you." But the Mongols brought more than just death. They brought the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace. For the first time, you could walk from Rome to Beijing safely. The Silk Road reopened. Gunpowder, paper, and the compass traveled from China to Europe. But something else traveled along those roads, something invisible.
In 1347, Genoese trading ships arrived in Sicily from the Black Sea. When the sailors docked, they were mostly dead. Their bodies were covered in black, oozing boils. The Black Death had arrived. It was a bacteria carried by fleas on rats, and it was efficient. In just 4 years, it killed between 75 and 200 million people. Europe lost 50% of its population. Imagine your city. Now imagine half the people gone. No priests to bury the dead, no farmers to harvest the crops. Entire villages stood empty, reclaimed by nature. People thought it was the end of the world. They whipped themselves in the streets to appease God's anger. They blamed the Jews, leading to horrific massacres. But in this absolute darkness, a seed was planted. With fewer workers, peasants could demand higher wages. The feudal system cracked. The authority of the church, which could not stop the plague, was questioned. The old world was dead. The survivors looked around and realized they had to build something new. The Dark Ages were ending. The medieval nightmare of plague and war had cleared the board. Humanity was ready to wake up. They were ready to rediscover the art of Greece and the order of Rome. They were ready to paint, to explore, and to question everything. Next time, we enter the Age of Rebirth. We will meet Da Vinci, Michelangelo, and a man named Columbus who sails west looking for India and finds a new world. This is the story of us, and we are just getting started.